Tank Showdown in Korea. M26 Pershing versus T-34-85. Hey, everyone, subscribe to our channel and drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into an epic tale of tank battles from the Korean War, where the American M26 Pershing squared off against the Soviet-designed T-34-85. It's the early morning of June 25, 1950, and the quiet along the 38th parallel is shattered by the roar of tank engines and gunfire. North Korean forces, armed with Soviet T-34-85 tanks, storm across the border, kicking off the Korean War. This was no ordinary conflict. It was a clash of ideologies, with the United States and its allies facing off against Soviet-backed North Korea. The T-34-85, a legend of World War II, became the ultimate nightmare for South Korean and American troops. Let's unpack this dramatic showdown, explore what made these battles iconic, and see how American grit and ingenuity turned the tide. The Korean War wasn't just about two Koreas fighting. It was a global stage where the Cold War heated up. North Korea, with Soviet and Chinese support, rolled out their tanks in a blitz that stunned the world. Meanwhile, the U.S. scrambled to back South Korea, bringing in everything from infantry to air power to stop the onslaught. This story is about how tanks, especially the M26 Pershing, became game changers in a war that tested America's resolve. North Korea's blitz, the T-34-85 terror. Imagine you're a South Korean soldier in 1950, watching a column of Soviet-made T-34-85 tanks rumble toward you. North Korea had 258 of these beasts before the war, with another 100 arriving in the first month. These tanks were no joke. Designed during World War II, they had thick, sloped armor, about 45 millimeters in the front, that shrugged off most anti-tank weapons of the time. Their 85 millimeter guns could punch through almost anything, and their diesel engines kept them moving fast and reliably. For South Korea's army, this was a disaster. Their 57 millimeter anti-tank guns and 2.36-inch bazookas were useless against the T-34-85's armor. North Korean tank crews, trained by Soviet advisors, steamrolled through defenses, capturing Seoul, South Korea's capital, in just 3 days. Panic set in. Soldiers developed tank fright, a paralyzing fear of these unstoppable machines. I can't help but think about how terrifying it must have been to face a steel monster that your weapons couldn't even scratch. It's like trying to stop a runaway train with a slingshot. First clashes. America joins the fight. A week after the invasion, American troops arrived in Korea and faced the T-34-85 head-on. The first encounter was with a U.S. infantry division trying to hold off 30 North Korean tanks. It was a rough wake-up call. Their 105 millimeter howitzers fired high explosive shells that barely dented the T-34s, and they only had a handful, less than 10, of special cumulative shells that could do any damage. They managed to knock out 2 tanks, but the North Koreans kept coming. I can picture the chaos. Smoke filling the air, soldiers shouting, and the ground shaking as tanks rolled forward. The Americans were tough, but their gear wasn't ready for this. It was clear they needed something stronger to stand a chance. On July 10, 1950, the first tank-on-tank battle went down. A company of light M24 Chaffee tanks, armed with 75 millimeter guns, took on the T-30 4-85S. The result was brutal. 2 Chaffees were destroyed in the first fight, and 3 more the next day. The North Koreans didn't lose a single tank. The Chaffee's guns couldn't penetrate the T-34's front armor, and their own thin armor was no match for the enemy's fire. By the end of July, the company was down to just 2 tanks out of 14. It was a wake-up call for the U.S. Army. Light tanks weren't going to cut it. I keep thinking, what was it like for those American tankers, knowing their tanks were outclassed? It's like stepping into a boxing ring with a heavyweight champ when you're barely a middleweight. But the U.S. didn't back down. they started looking for answers. Sherman's Step Up, a fair fight? Next up, the U.S. brought in the M4 Sherman, a medium tank that was a workhorse of World War II. The Sherman was closer to the T-34-85 in terms of armor and mobility, but its 75mm gun struggled to penetrate the T-34's front armor unless it used special subcaliber or cumulative rounds, which were in short supply. In one battle, 10T-34-85S clashed with a company from the 70th Tank Battalion. Within minutes, 3 Shermans were knocked out. The Americans fought back hard, stopping the attack, but only destroyed 2 T-34s, one with a point-blank shot from a 105mm howitzer and 4 others with 3.5-inch super bazookas. Let's pause and reflect. The Sherman was a battle-tested tank, having faced German Panthers and Tigers in Europe. But in Korea, it met a different kind of challenge. The T-34-85 was simple, reliable, and deadly, with a gun that could pierce the Sherman's armor at typical combat ranges. The Americans were holding their own, but barely. What made the difference? Air power. U.S. planes dominated the skies, hammering North Korean tanks on the move and during attacks. Plus, those new super bazookas gave infantry a fighting chance. Still, in tank duels, the Shermans were only breaking even. The U.S. needed a trump card. Enter the M26 Pershing, America's heavy hitter. By early August 1950, the U.S. Army rolled out its secret weapon, the M26 Pershing. This tank was a beast, weighing 10 tons more than the T-34-85 and only 3 tons lighter than the Soviet IS-2 heavy tank. Its 90mm gun and thick armor, up to 100mm in the front, made it a formidable foe. The U.S. rushed to equip a Marine Corps tank battalion with Pershings and ship them to Korea. The Pershing's first clash with the T-34-85 came in mid-August, and it was a game-changer. A platoon of 4 Pershings, led by Lieutenant Sweet, was supporting an attack by 2 Marine regiments. The tanks followed the infantry, blasting enemy positions with direct fire. The advance was going well until the North Koreans launched a counterattack, led by 4 T-34-85S. Here's where it gets intense. The North Korean tanks, expecting no resistance, rolled forward in a column. Big mistake. Lieutenant Sweet positioned his Pershings in a staggered formation, blocking the road between hills. When the lead T-34-85 came into view, Sergeant Stanley Tarnowski fired 3 armor-piercing rounds. At first, the Americans thought they missed. No visible damage. But then they realized the 90mm shells were punching clean through the T-34, leaving holes on both sides. The second tank took multiple hits to the hull, but fired back. After 4 more shots to its turret, its ammo detonated in a spectacular explosion. The third tank caught fire after several hits, and the fourth tried to escape, but was finished off by infantry with super bazookas. The whole fight was over in 5 minutes, with no losses for the Pershings. I can imagine the cheers from the American tankers. After weeks of being outgunned, they finally had a tank that could dominate. The Pershing was the hero they'd been waiting for. Why the Pershing ruled the battlefield. So, what made the M26 Pershing so effective? It was a heavyweight in every sense. Its armor was tough enough to withstand most T-34-85 shots, and its 90mm gun could rip through the T-34's armor like butter. The only downside? It wasn't as nimble. The Pershing used the same engine as the lighter Sherman, which made it sluggish compared to the T-34-85. But in Korea's rugged terrain, with hills and narrow roads limiting movement, speed wasn't everything. I've been thinking about what makes a tank successful. It's not just about raw power. It's about the crew, the tactics, and sometimes a bit of luck. American tankers, many of whom had fought in World War II, had a big advantage in experience. North Korean crews were trained for fast offensives, but in head-to-head tank duels, they often came up short. It's like a chess match. Even if you've got a powerful piece, you need to know how to use it. Another American tanker, Robert Dillon, shared a wild story about a Pershing hitting a T-34-85's turret so hard it flew off its mount. That's straight out of an action movie. Imagine the shock of seeing a tank's turret blasted into the air. In another fight, Pershing Commander John Bowell recalled a close call. His tank took a hit from a T-34-85, but the armor held. They returned fire, knocking out one enemy tank with a clean shot to the turret. The second T-34 was hit, but managed to fire back, damaging the Pershing's track and disabling it. These stories bring the battlefield to life. Every fight was a high-stakes gamble, where split-second decisions meant life or death. The Pershing gave the Americans the edge they needed, but it wasn't invincible. Those damaged tracks proved it. To really understand the Korean War, let's zoom out and look at the economics behind it. In 1950, the U.S. was an economic powerhouse, with a GDP of about $2 trillion in today's money. This gave them a muscle to produce and deploy tanks, planes, and ships at a massive scale. The M26 Pershing, for example, cost around $250,000 per unit, while the T-34-85 was cheaper at about $100,000. North Korea relied on Soviet aid, with the USSR supplying tanks and weapons worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Here's where it gets interesting. Economics isn't just about money, it's about logistics. Getting Pershings to Korea meant shipping them across the Pacific, a weeks-long journey, then moving them over rough terrain to the front lines. North Korea, with shorter supply lines, could deploy their tanks faster. But the U.S. had air superiority, with planes like the F-86 Sabre and B-29 Super Fortress pounding North Korean positions. This leveled the playing field, making it possible for tanks like the Pershing to shine. I've been reflecting on this. Wars aren't just fought on the battlefield. They're fought in factories, shipyards, and supply chains. The U.S.'s ability to mobilize resources gave them a huge advantage, but North Korea's Soviet-backed tenacity kept them in the fight. The scorecard: who won the tank battles? By the end of the war, North Korea lost 239 T-34-85s. Most were taken out by airstrikes and super bazookas, but tank battles played a big role too. According to U.S. records, American tanks destroyed 97 T-34-85s while losing 34 of their own. The Pershings accounted for about 30 T-34 kills, losing only 6 tanks. Later in the war, the M26 Patton, a more advanced tank introduced in 1949, took out over 20 T-34s but lost 8 of its own. Here's the kicker. The T-34-85, designed in 1943, held its own against newer, heavier tanks like the Pershing and Patton. American tankers respected it, calling it a superb tank for its simplicity and reliability. It's like an old pickup truck that keeps running no matter what you throw at it. The T-34-85's losses were high, but it faced overwhelming odds, including air attacks and better-trained American crews. The Korean War teaches us a lot about warfare and human spirit. First, it shows that technology is only half the battle. The people operating it make the difference. American tankers, with their World War II experience, outmaneuvered their opponents. Second, adaptability is key. The U.S. rushed Pershings and Pattons into action, turning the tide. Finally, it's a reminder that wars are won through a mix of grit, strategy, and resources. I can't help but wonder, what if North Korea had used their T-34s more tactically? Their focus on frontal assaults worked early on, but in tank duels, they struggled. Maybe with better training, they could have changed the outcome. But that's the thing about history. It's full of what-ifs that keep us hooked. This is just one chapter of the Korean War's epic story, and I want to hear from you. What do you think? Could the T-34-85 have turned the tables with smarter tactics? Or was the Pershing destined to dominate? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's geek out over this piece of history together. Subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this. And don't forget to comment with your take. Let's keep digging into the past and uncovering lessons for the future. Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below. Your input fuels our passion for bringing history to life. What other battles or tanks should we cover next? Let's make this channel the go-to spot for epic war stories.